I was standing in the hallway of my building in Shadyside, staring at the open mailbox as if it might offer an explanation on its own. Cards addressed to me had been there the day before. That morning, only the one meant for Emily remained. The rest gone without a trace. Nothing about it felt accidental. A trip downstairs brought me to the front desk. The building manager shook his head before I even finished the question. No reports of missing mail, Mr. Halpern. Everything's been logged as usual. His certainty left no space for comfort. A thought pushed through unwelcome but stubborn. I stepped aside and dialed Emily. She picked up on the second ring. Emily, did you take any of my cards from the mailbox? What, Dad? No. Why would you even ask that you're being overly suspicious? Her tone sharpened, clipped at the edges. I just noticed. I'm in a meeting. We'll talk later. The line went dead before another word formed. Hours passed without easing the tension. While heading back to my place, Ruth from down the hall waved me over. She gestured for me to come closer, as if the conversation carried weight. David, I meant to mention, I saw Emily here yesterday when the mail carrier arrived. Thought she was waiting for you. That detail stopped me mid-step. Ruth wasn't one to gossip. She also wasn't the type to imagine things. Back home, a glance around the living room caught something near the wastebasket. A torn envelope lay half-tucked under a stack of newspapers. The paper stock resembled the kind friends used during the holidays, thick, patterned, familiar. No address remained on it, just a corner, ripped unevenly. My hand hovered over it longer than necessary before picking it up. Every year, people who had known me since my early 20s sent cards without fail. Their notes usually carried small stories, updates about family things that made the season feel grounded. Losing them felt more personal than losing regular mail. The phone rang again. An old friend's name flashed across the screen. Hey, David, just checking in. Did you get our Christmas card this year? Haven't heard from you. My throat tightened. Words didn't surface. You okay? It's unlike you not to respond? Silence stretched, and I finally managed, I haven't seen it. Strange, we sent it early. The call from my friend still echoed in my mind as I pulled into Bloomfield. Our group met at a small diner there every few weeks, and I needed to hear their side of things. The bell over the door jingled when I stepped in, and a couple of familiar faces waved me over. Before my coat even hit the back of the chair, Mark asked, Did you get our card, David? We added a family photo this year. Thought you'd enjoy it. My hands tightened around the menu. I never saw it, came out steadier than expected. Linda frowned. That's odd. We sent it early. You always write back. Their confusion wasn't dramatic, just genuine. That more than anything firmed the suspicion forming since the moment I saw that empty mailbox. A few minutes later, conversation drifted to other topics, but my thoughts didn't follow. Dates lined up in my head Ruth's comment about seeing Emily in the hallway the day USPS usually delivered holiday mail, the missing envelopes. Every detail seemed to fall into place with unsettling ease. After paying for my lunch, I stepped outside and took a photo of the building's mailbox setup. The picture went straight to Marilyn Ortiz with a short message. Could someone intercept mail without the carrier noticing she had worked around administrative systems long enough to understand how these things could happen? Her response came fast. If someone keeps grabbing your mail, that's not a family misunderstanding anymore. That's interference. Be careful, David. The word interference stayed with me. It didn't belong to holiday mishaps or family miscommunications. It belonged to something else, something that crossed a line. Back at the building, the front desk attendant reminded me the security system only retained footage for 48 hours. Whatever had happened in that hallway was buried under newer recordings. No chance of retrieving anything now. He apologized, but the apology didn't touch what was really wrong. Walking toward the elevator, my phone buzzed. A text from another neighbor, Taylor. Saw Emily holding a stack of envelopes when she left your floor yesterday. Didn't think much of it until Ruth started talking. Each piece of information nudged the same direction, and none of it felt accidental anymore. Calling Emily again felt necessary. The line connected after a few rings. Emily, we need to talk about the cards missing from my mailbox. She exhaled loudly. What are you trying to imply this time, because it sounds like you're blaming me for whatever you can't keep track of? I'm asking a question. You're accusing me. I don't have time for this. The line cut off with the same finality as before. Her defensiveness, the speed, the tone carried more weight than whatever words she used. Accidents didn't need that much resistance. The afternoon stretched ahead, but I couldn't settle anywhere. Ruth's face when she mentioned seeing Emily. The torn envelope near my wastebasket. Friends telling me their cards hadn't reached me. All the fragments pressed together forming something solid enough to confront, but still too raw to name out loud. A message popped up from the pastor of St. Andrew's, reminding me about the Christmas gathering that evening. The invitation had been extended weeks earlier. I hadn't planned on going yet. The idea of sitting alone with unanswered questions didn't appeal. Community might keep my thoughts from running circles. Keys hit my palm as I stepped toward the car. The wind pushed a chill through my coat, but the cold wasn't what made my shoulders tense. The diner's conversations. The unanswered mail, Emily's clipped voice, each thing narrowed my focus to a single point. The moment my feet crossed the threshold of St. Andrew's, a familiar voice called out from near the sign-in table. David, are you still living in Shadyside? I mailed you a card this year, but never heard back. Before I managed to respond, Emily stepped in from behind me, speaking fast, almost rehearsed. He's been busy. He probably overlooked it. A few people turned toward us. Their expressions weren't accusatory, just curious, but the shift still settled heavily. Emily avoided my eyes, her jaw tightening for a second, before she forced a smile at the group. I didn't correct her. Something about the way she cut me off, as if she needed to answer on my behalf, kept me still. While we moved deeper into the hall, a woman in her 70s drifted closer. She leaned toward me and whispered, I saw your daughter asking the office for your contact list a couple weeks ago. Said she needed to update something. Thought you should know. Her words landed harder than she probably intended. She squeezed my arm gently and walked off, leaving me standing there with the kind of information no one can unhear. Emily caught the last part of the exchange and tugged at my sleeve. Dad, can we talk? I followed her toward a side corridor. She didn't wait for privacy. What was that? You're making me look bad. People think you're not answering cards because you're slipping. That's not what I said, I answered. But that's what they're thinking. She shot back. Do you understand how this makes me look? The words stung more than the tone. Her face carried irritation, not concern. Something tightened in my chest. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of recognition. A pattern repeating itself. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe I was overreacting to a handful of missing cards. Maybe the torn envelope meant nothing. Yet every conversation, the diners, the neighbors, the woman just now pushed against that doubt with steady pressure. Emily released a sharp breath and stepped away, ready to rejoin the gathering. I stayed a few seconds longer, collecting myself before returning to the fellowship hall. Tables had filled by then, people chatting freely, plates being passed around. I found a seat at the end of a long table, nodding to the couple across from me. They were mid-story when someone down the row called out, Hey David, did you ever get my Christmas card? I meant to ask earlier. Everything at the table paused just long enough to feel unnatural. Heads turned not in confrontation, just looking for an answer. Emily stiffened. She lifted her chin and said, "He gets a lot of mail. I'm sure it turned up somewhere." The phrasing, so vague, so careless, shifted the air around the table. A few people exchanged glances. Emily sensed it and faltered, then added, "He probably misplaced it. These things happen." She sounded less certain with every word. I set my fork down. "I didn't receive any cards this year," I said evenly, "except the one from Emily." That single sentence dropped between us, steady and factual. No accusation, no emphasis, just truth. Emily's face lost its color for an instant. She opened her mouth, searching for an explanation that wouldn't appear forced, but nothing came out. Her fingers curled around the edge of her napkin knuckles, pressing white. People didn't speak. They simply observed, waiting, thinking, reassessing. Their attention wasn't hostile, but it was focused, and she could feel every ounce of it. She pushed her chair back slightly, then stopped halfway, unable to commit to leaving or staying. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was expectant, like a room holding its breath before the next part of a conversation none of us had planned to start. I lifted my glass, not to make a point, but to have something to do with my hands. Emily stared at the table, as if the pattern might offer a rescue. The conversations around us slowly resumed, though more cautiously. The moment had passed on the surface, yet it stayed beneath, shifting the ground under everything that came next. Emily slipped out of the fellowship hall before dessert was served. One moment she stood a few steps behind me, the next she vanished into the crowd near the exit. I tried calling her once I stepped outside. The phone rang long enough to prove she saw it, and chose not to answer. Driving home, the road signs blurred together, not from speed, but from the way my thoughts crowded the wheel. Nothing about the night had settled. Everything had shifted, and her absence only pushed the questions further. A letter from the bank waited near my door, propped against the frame, as if someone wanted to make sure I noticed it. The envelope looked official enough that I opened it immediately. The message inside requested verification for a change of mailing address tied to my savings account, an account no one else should have known in detail. The words pulled a cold thread down my spine. I reread them twice, hoping the language had been misinterpreted. It hadn't. The next morning I drove downtown to the attorney who had handled my estate paperwork years earlier. He greeted me politely, yet his expression sharpened as soon as I laid the letter on his desk. "Let's take a look," he said, sliding on his glasses. After scanning the notice, he pulled a printout from his system. "There was also an attempt to register access to your banking email portal," he added. "The signature provided doesn't match yours, not even close." A weight settled across my shoulders. He pointed to the section flagging the discrepancy. "This isn't a clerical mistake. Someone submitted documents on your behalf." His pen tapped the margin near another note. "Your pension review notice was also triggered. Someone asked the institution to reconsider who receives certain updates. More than mail, more than missing cards. This cut into future security, into the years I'd worked to safeguard." He leaned back and asked, "Do you have anyone in your family who might want control of your financial information?" The question sat in the room heavy and uncomfortably direct. No answer came out. Not because I didn't know, because saying her name to a lawyer made the suspicion real in a way I wasn't prepared for. He didn't push. Instead, he contacted the bank while I waited across from him, hands pressed together to keep them steady. Minutes passed before he hung up the phone. "David," he said, voice measured. "The request to change your mailing address came from someone identifying themselves as Emily Halpern." The hearing of it, not the assumption, not the possibility, but the confirmation made everything tilt. Cards, missing, neighbors noticing her defensiveness, then this. a step far beyond overreach. He handed me a printed copy of the request. My name sat at the top, but the signature didn't belong to me. Anyone who had seen my handwriting once would have known. My stomach tightened, while a quiet realization threaded through the cards were never the issue. They were just the first part she thought I wouldn't question. The attempt to manage my accounts was the true aim. The attorney continued outlining steps for securing my records, though the words reached me in sections. "We'll notify the bank formally," he said, "and you'll want to reset all online logins. I'd also advise placing a fraud alert. This pattern could escalate." His pen scratched across a legal pad, drafting instructions I'd need to follow. My eyes drifted down to the paper in my hand. My signature forged my address, altered my accounts, accessed without permission. No denial could stand beside evidence printed in black ink. The attorney asked if I wanted him to call Emily, but I declined. Speaking to her in that moment felt impossible. The truth already occupied the space between us with more clarity than any conversation could supply. Leaving the attorney's office, I didn't head toward the garage. My steps carried me straight to the bank across the street, as if hesitation might give someone else time to alter another piece of my life. A receptionist directed me to a representative named Caleb, who listened patiently while I laid the documents on his desk. He skimmed the forms, then opened my account file. His eyebrows drew together. "Mr. Halpern, there have been multiple attempts to update your information this month. 3 separate requests, all tied to the last name Halpern." The confirmation hit harder than I expected. 3, I asked. "Yes. Different dates, but the same general changes address notification preferences and secondary access." Caleb tapped the screen, then turned slightly toward me. "We'll need additional proof of identity to verify you're the rightful account holder. It's standard when family disputes or unclear authorizations show up. A word like disputes shouldn't have belonged to my household. Yet here it was, spoken calmly by a stranger who had no idea how deep it cut. The years of giving Emily the benefit of the doubt, the willingness to absorb her frustrations, the habit of stepping aside to avoid conflict, they all converged into one sharp truth. She assumed control because I'd taught her I wouldn't stop her. Caleb printed several forms. "We can freeze all pending changes immediately," he added. "Nothing new will be processed unless you approve it personally." My throat tightened, but at least the path forward didn't feel entirely out of reach. "Do that," I said. "Lock everything down." While he filed the request, my phone rang. Marilyn's name appeared on the screen. "David," she said, "the moment I answered, I just heard something from Ruth. She said Emily asked the building staff about your spare key a while back. Wanted to know if you'd turned in an old copy." The words dragged the breath from my chest. "She asked about my key?" "Yes. Ruth didn't want to alarm you before, but after hearing about the mail, she thought you should know." Pressure mounted with every new detail. The missing cards felt small compared to someone circling around access points, mail accounts keys. A kind of strategy threaded through it, and none of it favored me. Caleb returned with the forms. Marilyn's voice softened. "David, this isn't normal. You need to protect yourself." "I hear you," I said, though the words barely registered in my own ears. She reminded me to call later, then hung up. Several notification pings flashed across my phone as I set it on the desk to sign paperwork. Messages from Emily scrolled down in a long row. "Dad, please listen. I didn't mean for things to get confusing. You always assume the worst. I just want to help, but you won't let me. You never give me a chance to explain." Apologies threaded between accusations, each sentence pulling in a different direction, none of them addressing the forged signatures or bank requests. Caleb finished processing the freeze, then handed me a folder. "You're all set for now," he said. "But stay alert. Whoever submitted those requests may try again." The word whoever lingered, even though both of us knew exactly who he meant. While walking toward the exit, another text arrived, this time from Taylor, the neighbor who'd messaged me earlier. Found this on the building's front camera archive. A photo followed. Emily stood outside the entrance on the same day the cards disappeared, a large paper bag tucked under her arm. Her posture wasn't casual. She looked like someone carrying something she didn't want people asking about. I brought the printed photo straight to the attorney the next morning. He studied it for a long moment, narrowing his eyes at the timestamp. "Emily was at your building the day the cards disappeared," he said. "Combined with the bank requests, this goes beyond a family misunderstanding. This is interference with mail and possibly fraud." He set the photo aside and turned to his monitor. "Let me check something." His fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard. A new document opened on the screen, and he leaned closer. "Here we are. 2 weeks ago, someone submitted an initial petition for Future Asset Authority naming themselves as your designated manager. The form wasn't completed, but it's in the system." The sentence hit with both force and clarity. Part of me felt vindicated. This wasn't paranoia. Another part recoiled because seeing her name attached to the petition made the situation painfully real. He rotated the screen so I could see. Emily Halpern, petitioner. Requested authority management of financial decisions, access to accounts, and discretionary control over mail associated with those accounts. My chest tightened, though not from shock, more from the sharp understanding that the missing cards had been the smallest piece of a much larger structure. The attorney continued, voice steady. "There's more." She submitted a personal statement claiming you've shown signs of cognitive decline. She used that to justify her involvement with your records. Hearing it out loud nearly knocked the breath from me. A claim like that, if left unchallenged, could alter every part of my autonomy. It could turn me from a victim into a man being protected against his will. He added, "We need to gather anything that disproves her claims. Employment records, medical reports, documentation showing you function independently. Otherwise, she may position herself as the responsible party, and the state will treat her as such until proven otherwise." A heaviness pressed across my shoulders. Doubt pushed in briefly. Had I ignored something in her behavior all these years, or had I simply wanted to believe the tension between us would never turn into this? I stepped into the hallway and called Marilyn. She picked up mid-ring. "David." "What's going on?" I kept it short, describing the petition and the accusation of cognitive decline. She said that Marilyn's voice rose, then steadied. "I remember some texts she sent you months ago, her saying not to make a big deal out of the Christmas mail. Those could help show she was manipulating the situation, not caring for your well-being. Can you find them?" "Yes. I'll pull everything I have. If she sent anything that contradicts her claim, you'll need it." Her determination gave me a faint sense of footing. Not hope exactly, but something close. Returning home later that afternoon, the door to my apartment resisted slightly before opening. It wasn't enough to call forced entry, but enough to notice. The lock bore faint smudges, fingerprints overlapping in irregular patterns. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing was moved. Yet the shift in the lock said someone had tested access or tried to. The thought crawled through me with a cold clarity I couldn't shake. I closed the door carefully, then checked the windows and cabinets, not because I expected someone to be there, but because I needed to know what else she might have touched. The attorney and I spent most of the next morning assembling the response packet. He gathered my recent medical evaluations, employment verification from the shop, and statements confirming I handled my own affairs without assistance. I added the photo of Emily at the building, the altered forms, and every document showing the forged signatures. The file grew thicker by the minute. Marilyn called while the attorney formatted the final pages. I found the messages, she said. There's a long thread where Emily tells you, "You never pay attention, so I have to step in." It shows intent, David. She wasn't caring for you, she was taking over. Her voice held a mix of frustration and concern. Send everything I told her, whatever you think might matter. Within minutes, several screenshots arrived, time-stamped, unedited, unmistakably hers. The attorney nodded when I handed them over. This contradicts her claim of declining cognition. It proves she acted without your consent. A steadiness settled in my chest. Not relief exactly, but a sense of footing I hadn't felt in days. The doubt that had hovered at the edges began to recede. There was nothing imagined here. Every line pointed to a deliberate plan. Bank representatives met with us later that afternoon. One of them, a supervisor named Roland, laid out their findings. Mr. Halpern, all 3 requests show signature inconsistencies. We're forwarding our report to the legal department. If you authorize it, we'll proceed with a formal review for possible fraudulent activity. My response came without hesitation. Do it, Roland continued. We'll also attach your own statements and the attorney's records. This will help establish that you were not the one initiating these changes. The tide had begun to turn slowly, but unmistakably. When returning to the apartment, a figure appeared near the entrance. Emily stepped out from behind one of the pillars, eyes-rimmed red hands clasped, as if she were bracing for impact. Dad, we need to talk. Her voice trembled. She moved closer before I agreed to anything. I heard something's happening with the bank. They're saying terrible things. I only tried to help you. You don't keep track of things the way you used to. Tears filled her eyes, spilling fast. Everything I did was for you. You can't believe I meant harm. Her script was familiar, the blend of fear, indignation, and guilt. Another version of the same argument she'd used when smaller lines were crossed, the missing receipts, the edited voicemails, the mail she occasionally sorted for me. I let her speak. Every sentence came laced with an appeal to duty, hers or mine, depending on the moment. You're making this bigger than it is, she whispered. People are twisting things. You have to tell them you're fine. Tell them you don't need any investigation. Not a word addressed the forged forms or the petition. Nothing acknowledged the photo, the bank alert, the altered address. When she paused long enough for me to answer, I simply said, "We'll sort things out through the proper channels." Her expression froze. She opened her mouth to argue, but I stepped past her toward the stairs. She didn't follow. During our final meeting with the attorney that week, he arranged the evidence into a coherent timeline. You speak clearly about each step, he said. No exaggeration, no speculation. Just what happened. So I did. Every instance laid out in simple terms, the missing cards, the building reports, the bank alerts, her messages, the petition claiming I was slipping. Speaking it aloud reassembled the last few weeks in a way that stripped away doubt. This wasn't confusion or miscommunication. It was a pattern. Late in the afternoon, the legal department from the bank contacted the attorney. Their director did not bother with formal small talk. We've accepted the case. A full review is underway. It meets criteria for potential mail interference signature falsification and attempted financial displacement. The attorney nodded as he listened, then relayed the summary to me after the call ended. They're moving forward. You did the right thing building this file. I didn't celebrate. Victory wasn't the feeling. It was more like removing a stone from your shoe after miles of pretending it didn't hurt. That evening, while I started sorting dinner, my phone vibrated on the counter. A new email notification appeared from the bank's automated system addressed to both of us. The subject line read, "Mandatory in-person meeting required regarding pending investigation." Emily's name appeared beneath mine. I opened the message and read it twice. Moments later, another buzz signaled a text from her dad. What is this? Why am I being called in? What did you tell them? I didn't respond. The screen dimmed on its own, leaving her last message visible while the rest of the kitchen settled around me. The call came early just after sunrise from the financial security office connected to my bank. A man introduced himself, then moved straight to the point. Mr. Halpern, all accounts in your name have been restored. Any requests submitted by Ms. Emily Halpern were revoked. Your file is secure again. His tone carried no judgment, no sympathy, only closure. We'll forward written confirmation, he added. Please reach out if anything else surfaces. I thanked him and set the phone down. Standing there in the kitchen, I felt something loosen that had been clenched for years. Not because the crisis ended, but because I finally saw how much space I'd given Emily to shape my life. All those times I stayed silent to avoid conflict, each one had taught her the same lesson: I wouldn't push back. She crossed lines because I kept pretending they weren't lines at all. Later that morning, a small pile of cards waited in my mailbox, fresh ones from friends who'd heard what happened and decided to resend their greetings. I took them upstairs and placed each on the mantel. Their notes weren't dramatic, just warm reminders from people who assumed I mattered enough to write to. Emily, on the other hand, faced consequences from several directions. My attorney forwarded a document requiring her to sign a non-interference agreement, no access to my mail property or financial information in any form. St. Andrews contacted me as well, politely stating that her volunteer work was suspended due to ethical concerns tied to community trust. Late in the afternoon, she appeared at my door without calling first. Dad, can we talk? Her voice didn't sound like the defensive tone I'd grown used to. It was softer, careful, as if she were searching for a version of herself she thought might work now. I stepped aside just enough for her to enter. She didn't move far. I know things look bad, she said. I made mistakes. I was trying to plan for your future. Everything got twisted. She took a breath and approached another angle. I need one more chance. If you could just tell them you don't want this to go any further. Her words drifted into a plea. I don't want to lose you. I'm asking you to give me a way back. Nothing in me hated her. Nothing wanted revenge for the sake of hurting her. But the request itself, asking me to undo the process meant to protect me, showed she still didn't understand the harm. I let her finish. When she paused, waiting for reassurance, I simply said, Emily, I heard you. And I'm thinking carefully about everything. No promises, no retreat, just the truth. She nodded stiffly, realizing the conversation wasn't bending her way. She left without raising her voice, without another plea, just a long, unreadable look before the door closed behind her. The next day, work at the shop felt strangely grounding. Machines humming, co-workers talking, tasks laid out in predictable order. Routine had never felt like restoration until then. By Saturday, I'd decided to join the hiking group at North Park. Marilyn had mentioned them before, and I'd always brushed it off, telling myself I didn't have the time. Now the idea of walking unfamiliar trails with strangers who expected nothing from me sounded like a good beginning. The group gathered near the main lot. A man in a blue jacket greeted me with a simple morning, then continued organizing gear. No one asked about my week or what brought me there. That small mercy gave me room to breathe. During the hike, my legs worked harder than I expected, but the rhythm steadied my mind. The conversations around me drifted from gardening to grandchildren, to best places, to buy winter boots. Nothing heavy. Nothing complicated. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't managing anyone else's expectations. When we finished, a woman offered me a pamphlet about upcoming weekend routes. Join anytime, she said. We have room for whoever shows up. Her smile wasn't intrusive, just an invitation without strings. Back home, a small to-do list waited on my kitchen table. I added several items: new passwords, upcoming appointments, errands for the week. At the bottom of the page, I scribbled a simple note: North Park next Saturday. Evening settled slowly. I gathered the holiday cards back into my hands, straightened them again on the mantel, then checked the hallway one last time before locking the door. My coat hung by the entry, and the small notebook I'd started using sat on the counter. I picked it up as I stepped out, turning to make sure the door clicked shut behind me. The hallway felt ordinary, just another part of the building I had lived in for years. Yet something had shifted in me. I tucked the notebook under my arm and headed toward the elevator, thinking about the coming week, about the hike, about small things that hadn't belonged to me for a long time and now slowly did again.